Hey everyone, it's Rob, and a week ago or so I made a video of adding a solo to Taylor Swift's Love Story, and this is kind of the full video that I wanted to make at the time, but at that moment I only had the solo made and I just didn't have enough time to kind of get around to make this full big video. And essentially what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing a song analysis where I break down the song and like its chord progression, and then I'll have an explanation of kind of how I created the solo and the different ideas that I had when I was working on it. I'll add the solo first, and then I'll add a timestamp to it. So if you just want to watch that, you can, and you want to skip over all the, or if you don't want to see all the nerdy music theory stuff, that's totally fine. I'll add that in the description, as well as a link to the actual like 30-second video that I made. But other than that, I'm just gonna kick this off and kind of start right into like the actual video that I originally wanted to make, and that's kind of explaining kind of like where I am with Taylor Swift and kind of what I think about her and everything. So first of all, I'm not really a huge fan of Taylor Swift. I mean, I do like her music, and as an artist, she's clearly a great songwriter and performer. She obviously kind of has to be if she's essentially, I'm pretty sure she's the biggest artist in the world right now. But normally her music is not really my thing. I'm more of a metal and rock type of person. But yeah, my wife kind of brought this up to me and she was just like, "Hey, you should look into some Taylor Swift songs. That could be kind of fun for you to kind of do." And I was just like, "Yeah, okay, yeah, I guess I'll check one out." So I decided, what the heck, I'll take a look at one of the songs that I really know. Growing up, she was pretty big. Well, not pretty big yet, but her first couple albums were like what I primarily heard. So I don't know a lot of her newer stuff, but I know a lot of her older stuff. So I chose Love Story. And that's kind of how I ended up on it. I actually really do like the song, but yeah, it's just normally not what I would usually listen to on my own. Usually with my song analysis videos, I kind of write my own mini version of the song that's kind of, or like my own mini piece that is based off of the song that I'm analyzing. But in this case, I thought it could be kind of fun to kind of mix my rock and metal sort of side of things with the Taylor Swift song. And I thought, okay, it could be kind of fun to write a guitar solo over a Taylor Swift piece. And just wanted to see what I could do, or if it would work at all, or if it would even sound good at all. And I think it turned out pretty well. So the next part is just going to be like the 30-second clip. And essentially what I did is I just isolated out the original violin solo that plays, and then I wrote my own guitar solo in that spot. I think it's after the second chorus. Yeah, the second after the second chorus, there's the solo part that you hear like the violin doing. I took those out and then I added my own part. So here's what it sounds like. So I'll get into how I wrote the solo after I go through the song's chord progression and kind of do my analysis on it. And first of all, the song is in D major. So what that means is that we have this diatonic chord progression here, which is D, E minor, F sharp minor, G, A, B minor, and then C sharp diminished. And if you don't really know what's going on with this, I have a video explaining kind of how this makes sense and what this actually means. Throughout the video, I also have all these Roman numerals here, and these correspond with the different chords here. So D and D major is 1, E minor is 2, F sharp minor is 3, and so on and so forth. And this really helps us kind of figure out what the chord progressions are, and when looking at it musically, there's certain things that you do with these chords. So like 5 going to 1 is a cadence, and I'll explain more on that later, and kind of what is going on between these chords and how Taylor Swift uses them. But essentially, just to start off, the song's in D major. And there's actually only going to be 4 chords out of this entire diatonic chord progression that are used throughout the entire song. And that is D, G, A, and B minor. Eventually, that's not 100% true because at the end of the song she kind of modulates, which means she changes key. But I'll get to that when I get there. But it's the same chord progression still when she modulates. But really, the four chords that we're going to be using is the 1, the 5, and the 4, and then the 6. So those are the four chords that she uses throughout the entire song, and they're just as she changes between the verse, the pre-chorus, the chorus, and all that stuff. She just kind of rotates these chords around, and you'll see when we get there. It's pretty cool, but it is pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. So, but anyways, before we go forward, I can quickly show how these chords are played on the guitar and kind of how it's related. So that way you can kind of visualize what these chords are and kind of see what they actually are. And then as we go through and as I show like through here, I'll just kind of go through and I can actually play the chords as we go through and kind of like play them on the guitar so you can hear them and understand what's happening. But yeah, so let's go ahead and start with that. Okay, so there are four chords in this song. There's D, G, A, and B minor. And I guess really the best way to kind of showcase these chords and kind of how I'm going to play them throughout the song and kind of what I'm going to do for my examples is I'll just play kind of like through the intro and kind of like, so that's D, A, B minor, and G. And I'll kind of talk more a little bit about the intro in just a second. But first, here are the chords. So the first one is D, and that sounds like this. And then we have A major, which sounds like this. And then we have B minor. And then from there we have G. Now normally if you play guitar, you probably know G, the campfire chord, like this. And that's the G position, G. So there's like a whole lot of ways to play chords, but the way that the G is played in this song is actually the E version of it. If that doesn't make sense, that's totally fine. It's more of like a guitar thing, but it sounds like this. And then if I kind of put everything together, I'll just quickly play through the intro here, or at least the chord progression of it, and this should sound super familiar. So that's going to sound like this. And again, this is D major, A major, B minor, and then G major. Not exactly the cleanest there, but that's okay. I think you kind of got the point. Anyways, let's go ahead and jump back into the actual music theory, and I'll show you the chord progressions. And as I'm kind of showing you guys, I can also kind of play through the chord progressions. But yeah, let's get into it. All right, so the intro. I just played it, so I'm not gonna replay through any of these chords or anything. But yeah, there's not a whole lot to say here. These are just like the first couple bars before Taylor starts singing, pretty much. And it's just kind of there to establish the chords or the key of the song. So we're starting in D because we're in D major. The vast majority of music, especially pop music, whatever key you're in, the very first chord is going to be the 1. And that is not always 100% the case, but I would say at least 90% of the time, more than likely, especially in pop music, the one is going to be where you're starting. And honestly, it's not just pop music, it's almost like any genre of music. Most music is going to start with the actual root, because that is what the very first thing that if your ear hears that, that's what it's going to be kind of like, okay, this is like the starting point, right? So that's kind of what most artists do. And that's really all I can say about the intro. There's not a whole lot going on here. It's just this chord progression, and honestly, it's just starting off the song. So let's go ahead and get into the verse. So the verse is not that much difference. I'm going to break it up into two parts, and I'll explain why in a second. But essentially, the whole point of a verse is to, again, kind of get you more accustomed to the song and get you kind of pulled in. I want to say, like, we're pulling you into this thought of, like, hey, we are in D major. You're going to sit here and you're going to like D major. And again, that's just like the vast majority of songs. So, like, you're not really, like, building tension in a verse most of the time. You can, but for the most part, the verse is just to, again, once again, you're just becoming more acquainted with the song and the sounds that you're hearing. So this is, again, a pretty standard verse. So we start with D, go to G, then go to B minor, G. So 1, 4, 6, 4. And then for the second half, I have D, G, B minor, and A. And you might not think that this here is very different, but the G and the A actually make a big difference between what happens in the pre-chorus, where she does want to build tension up and, like, build up a bunch of tension isn't quite the right word. It's more like, how should I describe this? Think of, like, if you're waiting for the drop of a song. That's kind of what the pre-chorus does. And there's a reason why she has A here. And when she pushes into the pre-chorus, it's going to be different than what you expect. But anyways, I'll get to that when I talk about the pre-chorus. But for now, everything here is pretty standard. And it's just, again, trying to introduce you to the song. You know, she's setting up her love story. That's the whole type of thing. So this is kind of like the background knowledge of what's going on. And this is where a verse is normally when you have, like, your kind of like your build up, your world building around the song and kind of like what's happening. And then as we progress further in the song, things get a little crazier and a little bit different. But for now, that is what the verse is. And I'll go ahead and I'll play through these parts and show you what it sounds like. All right, so for part one, it is D, G, B minor, and G. And it's going to sound something like this. So that is part one, and part two is the same thing. And I mean, I guess I can quickly play through it, but again, the only difference here is that there's D, G, B minor, and then A. And the A will make more sense when we talk about the pre-chorus, but just try to see if you can hear a difference. And then I'll play more of this too, like going back and forth between the verse and the pre-chorus to kind of really nail down what I'm going to explain. And kind of explain the difference between A and G here. But for now, I'll just play these 4 chords. And then if you don't hear anything, that's fine. But you should definitely hear something when I go back through and I play from this part into the verse. And then I'll swap some chords around. And you should definitely hear a difference then. But for now, let's just stick to these 4 chords. So D, G, B minor, and A would sound like this. All right, so the pre-chorus. Let's move to that. And now this normally is the part of the song where you do want to build up some tension or, like, build up some suspense, because when you get to the chorus, normally what the goal is with the chorus is you want to hit hard. Like, you want to, like, slap people in the face with the song, and it's gonna be like your big. It is like the biggest part of the song because that is the part that everyone should, you know, imagine you're on a stage. The chorus is the part of the song that you want people singing along to and like jumping around and moshing as hard as possible to. I don't know. There's probably not moshing at Taylor Swift concerts, I would guess, but essentially this is the part of the song where you want to set that up. So the whole goal here is to kind of build, again, I'm going to use tension, but it's not really tension like fear or anything. It's more like anticipation is a better term. So you're building up this gigantic bomb that you just want to drop, and it goes boom in the chorus, and then everything takes off. That's kind of the whole point of the pre-chorus here. And she immediately starts that by going with, from the verse here. This is why part 2 is super important, because she's going from 5, and normally at this point your ear is going to naturally want to go back to D. So after going D, G, B minor, G, D, G, B minor, A, your mind is going to instinctually be like, okay, we're going back to D because this is our home base. This is what we've done for here. We've done this here. And actually we did it with the intro. So we start with the intro. Oh, look, we landed on D. We went through the first part of the verse. Oh, now we're going through the second part of the verse. Oh, so now we know what's happening. We know what's coming up next. It's this D chord. And Taylor Swift is like, no, you're wrong. It's a G. So your ear kind of goes, wait, what is going on? What is happening? Because you're waiting for this chord to play. And this doesn't really release it too much. This entire build up here releases to the chorus, which obviously does go to D. So that's why the chorus like slaps so hard, is because you are building up here in the pre-chorus, and then you're going to D here. And kind of to explain this in a musical term, so normally at the end of a musical phrase, we have what's called a cadence, and there's a bunch of different types of cadences. I'm not going to get into all the different types and exactly what they are, but the big one here that we are expecting is the perfect cadence. And what that means is that you're going from this big fat old 5 to 1. If you go from 5 to 1 and you're ending the sequence, or you're at the end of a musical kind of sound or a musical phrase, that is a perfect cadence. And this going from 5 to 1 here sounds really good. Like you're releasing everything and everything sounds resolved. So that's kind of the point here. And that's kind of the whole purpose of this pre-chorus, is that you see that there's only one D chord here. So there's a bunch of chords here. And what's happening is she's trying to not play this chord as much as possible, because as long as she can keep all these other chords going, your mind keeps wanting to hear this one. But she doesn't allow that. Instead, she's like, you gotta wait a second until we get to the chorus. So that's essentially what's happening here. And that's the whole point of a pre-chorus. And that's kind of what I wanted to explain here as to what was happening. And I'm actually going to go through a couple differences here, and we can compare and contrast how this sounds. So if I change some chords around here going from this verse to the pre-chorus, you should definitely hear some differences, and we'll jump into that now. But first, well, I guess first I'll go through the pre-chorus and just kind of play these chords, but and then I'll jump into that. So here is the pre-chorus. Actually, before I play this, there is one other thing that I want to bring up, and the reason why this D is here is to actually kind of trick you later on. So what's happening here is she plays G, A, B minor, D, and you're like, oh, that's cool. So, but when she goes back around again, notice she plays G, A, B minor, and then she goes back to G, and then A again. And at this point, your mind is like, what is going on? Where's this D? So that's kind of what's happening here, and that's kind of what the point of this D chord here is. I realized that after I kind of started playing, I'm like, oh, wait a second, that's exactly what's happening. So now let's go ahead and play through it. Okay, so after that, you should have definitely heard what I meant and about this D chord here and how it feels really weird playing G, A, B minor, D, and then playing G, A, B minor, G, and then A. Your ear, after this B minor, really wants to hear D. So that's the whole kind of magnum opus of what's happening here is Taylor Swift is really pushing you on like, hey, you really want to hear this chord? Well, you're going to get it in the chorus. You just have to wait a little longer. So that's kind of what's happening with this pre-chorus. Uh, Now let's go back to what I was talking about before in this verse and the pre-chorus and kind of how they connect. So again, there's a big difference here between G and A. Um, and there's a reason why she chose A here to jump from this 5, because naturally from 5 at the end of this phrase, you want to hear D. So it's actually pretty much the same exact thing that happened in the pre-chorus, except it starts here at the end of the verse. So she goes from D, G, B minor, A into G, but naturally your ear wants to hear dear, not dear, D. So I'm gonna go ahead and play through just to kind of give an example of what is actually happening here, because this might not make sense until you hear it. So this first time through, I'm gonna play D, G, B minor, A, and then D. And everything should sound fine and like everything kind of makes sense and resonates perfectly well and everything just kind of falls into place. That's kind of the vibe that you should get from it. But when I play D, G, B minor, A, G, it should not feel like that. And your ear should really want to hear this D. But, so I just kind of really want to hammer that in. And so let's go ahead and do that now. So first I'm going to do D, G, B minor, A, and then D. Okay, now just pay attention to the last couple chords primarily. You should not feel the same sense of resolve, or like things shouldn't feel quite right when I go from A to G. So hopefully that makes sense. That's the whole point of what's going on with this pre-chorus, and she actually kind of starts it here in the part 2 of the verse, and that's the reason why when she repeats the verse later, it's only one part of these, and she chooses the second part because this leads perfectly into the pre-chorus with this A. Because it really throws you off here. Going from A to G is not what you expect to hear, especially after hearing D, G, B, M, G, and again D, G, B, M, and then A. You naturally want to hear this D. So that's kind of the whole spiel that I have about this verse in the pre-chorus. So let's go ahead and then jump to the chorus, which is more or less like the big boom of the song. It's the fun part of the song. So let's go ahead and get into that. So honestly, there's not a lot to talk about the chorus. It's just this is like the big home run heavy hitter part of the song, and it's like everything goes wild, and but musically there's not like any setup or anything like happening behind the scenes like in the pre-chorus and the verse. This is just like the main meat and potatoes of the song, and this is like the main part of the song. So this is like this is like the biggest thing that Taylor Swift wants to emphasize with her song. And yeah, so there's not really a ton to dissect here, other than that you can see that she ends on a 5. And if we go to the next part here, it's the solo, and what starts at the beginning of the solo? It's D. And why is that? Because going from A to D, 5 to 1 is a perfect cadence. So it sounds really good and everything feels resolved. So after you have this big party over here and everyone's going crazy and throwing a rager, everything dies down and everyone falls asleep. And not like this. It's not like the solo's boring or anything, but like it's just musically your ear is satisfied when it gets to the solo and it's ready to just kind of start again. And so that's kind of what's happening here is going from chorus to solo, the primary thing to take away is this 5-1 is a perfect cadence. And I'll talk about the solo later. Um, there's not a ton to it, and this is kind of the primary part that I wrote over, obviously. Well, it's not the primary part, it is the part that I wrote my own solo over. So I'll talk more about the chord progression and actually more about the scales and kind of how I wrote my own stuff over it. So I'm not really going to talk about the solo much. So we'll jump into the bridge. I almost forgot to play the chorus, so I'll jump to that now before I get into the bridge. So here is the chorus. Alright, so the bridge. There's not a whole lot about the bridge to talk about, at least like theory-wise. This is again, a pretty standard chord progression. There's nothing really weird going on here, but I will talk about the purpose of a bridge in a song, and it's usually to kind of break up the monotony of the song a bit and kind of breathe some new life and some new ideas into the song that haven't already been played. So when you hear a bridge, you should not be able to recognize anything from the verse, the pre-chorus, or the chorus normally. And a lot of the times the chord progressions are different, obviously, to diversify it a little bit, so that way it doesn't sound too similar. Like, you don't want the bridge sounding like another part of the song, essentially. So the whole point of this part is to kind of pull you away a bit, and it's kind of to like, all right, we're going to take a little break. You're going to go in timeout for just a second. We're just going to sit here and relax and, play something cool and hang out for a little bit before we jump back into the party with the pre-chorus and the chorus again. That's normally what bridges do. Obviously, you can do anything you want with any type of music, but that's just kind of like the standard reasoning for having a bridge, and that's the whole purpose of it, normally. But again, the chord progression here is B minor, G, D, and A. Of course, landing on this A here, and then I don't have it down because I jumped to the final chorus, and there's some things I want to talk about with that, but this would normally jump to the pre-chorus, which starts with D. So going again from A to D, everything feels relieved. So you take this little break here on the bridge, you're going off on the bridge, off on your own, you're kind of exploring, and then all of a sudden you're back on the main road and dealing with the traffic and in the pre-chorus. And that's kind of what's happening. So that's all I want to talk about, and I'll play through the bridge real quick, and then we'll move on to the final chorus, which does have quite a lot of stuff going on with it. But we'll get to that when we get to that. So here's the bridge. Alright, so we've made it to the final boss, and that is this final chorus here. And this is actually really cool because all this time that I've listened to this song, I wasn't really actively listening. I was just kind of listening and like, oh, this is really cool, and I liked it. But I never actually realized, and I feel really stupid for this, but she actually modulates or changes key from D major to E major. So that's why this final chorus here sounds so much different than the other two choruses in the song, is because she's actually going from D up to E, and she's making that the main note. So what I mean by that is, if we go back here and we look at this chorus here, or this pre-chorus, so we have G, A, B, D, G, A, B, B minor, G, A, and then we jump to D. Instead of jumping to D, what she's doing is she's pushing this up, and she's just completely shifting everything forward to E major. So that's what's happening here, and that's why this sounds so different. The actual chord progression for the chorus is actually the same, which makes sense because normally when you modulate and you're doing something like this, it wouldn't sound right if these were all different. But so the chord progression is actually 1, 5, 6, 4, 5, which is the exact same thing as the chorus. And we can double check that by copying this and then comparing and contrasting here. So we got 1, 5, 6, 4, 5, and that's the first half of the final chorus. For the second half, it's the same thing, but she ends on 1. And there's a reason why she ends on 1 compared to 5. Remember when I was talking about this difference back here from this verse 2, from A to G compared to A to D? That is the exact same thing that happens at the end of the song. So when she's ending the song, it would sound super weird if she ended on B, right? Because you would be expecting to hear this chord. So what she's essentially doing is she's getting through the first part of the chorus, and then she's getting to the second part of the chorus, and then when she gets to this chord here, she's like, all right, I've got my bag, I'm ready to head out, and good night, and I'm done playing. So I'm just going to end on this tonic here, or this first chord. So that is the whole thought process behind the final chorus. And technically, bringing up cadences again, going from a 4 to a 1 is called a plagal cadence. And I'm not going to get into the whole explanation of everything. That's just what it is. It's just a fun fact. But essentially, that is why she ends on 1, because most songs begin and start on 1. And it doesn't matter if you change keys. If you change keys throughout the song, whatever key you're in, the vast majority, I would say like 90% of music, is going to end on the 1, unless if you want to keep people like in anticipation, and that's the whole point. But for the most part, most people don't do that. You can, and it's definitely been done before. But yeah, just for a general guideline, most songs begin on 1 and they end on 1, no matter what key they start in or end in. So that's kind of the whole spiel about the final chorus. When I play this on guitar, I'm actually going to show myself playing it, because there's some cool stuff that happens here by shifting everything forward, and I can kind of explain what is actually going on from a guitar standpoint. And I'll do that, and then I'll start jumping into my solo that I wrote over the original solo, and kind of going over all that stuff. But for now, let's jump into the final chorus. Alright, so there's a reason why I kind of wanted to show myself playing the final chorus, and kind of how everything kind of translates between the chorus and the final chorus. Because there's some really cool things that you can do with the guitar as an instrument that really help kind of solidify what is actually happening with this shifting that I mean. And essentially, with a guitar, it is cyclical, which means that like I can take this chord shape, so this is a G major chord, but if I push it up a fret, then it is G sharp, then it's A, and you can keep going all the way down, and you can keep rotating through the entire fretboard. And it's like that with every single chord shape. So it's not only like this chord shape, even like your bass campfire chord shapes like this. So G would normally be like this, but if you shift this up and you move your fingers around and you bar the chord like that, that is technically another chord. It's just, let's see, that's G, so this is A. So this would be A major here. And it's like that for everything. And that's kind of what's happening in this final chorus, is that she's just taking these chords, and what she's doing is she's shifting up a full step. So she's going like that, except I'd have to play it like that. So it's super cool, and I will play through just kind of the first example that I have and kind of how it makes sense. But yeah, here is just like a base example of like this, what I mean by you can move a chord shape just up and down. And it sounds like this. It doesn't sound bad, of course. Obviously, those aren't in key because those aren't like the same. That's a whole different thing. I'm not going to get into it. But essentially, you can move these chord shapes all the way, all over the place. And that's kind of like the main point that I want to make. So this final chorus is literally just taking her D, which is like this, shifting it up, and then this is E major now. And it's the same thing with all these other chords. So she has D, and then the A chord would normally be like this. That also gets shifted up like that, and then it's just like that, but I'm probably going to play it like that. And then the B minor gets shifted up to a C sharp minor. So instead of this, it just gets shifted up like that. And then we go from G to A. So like that. So here is what the final chorus sounds like. So that's the entire song analysis for Taylor Swift's Love Story. Now, what I want to do is actually jump into the solo portion and kind of talk about what I did to write the solo that I did and kind of how I wrote it and some different ideas that I had for it. So I will swap out my guitars here and I'll swap to my electric and we'll take a look at that. And this is going to be more on the guitar technical side. So at this point, if you just want to drop off, that is totally cool. If you want to stick around and kind of watch me kind of like go through some more guitar specific things, that's also totally cool. But if you learned something, please like and subscribe. And other than that, I hope if you're sticking around, let's have some fun and I'll show you what I did with the solo. Okay, so the solo and kind of how my thought process went with it and kind of how I wrote it. This is going to be significantly easier actually because my Blue Yeti doesn't pick up my guitar, which is nice, so I don't have to continuously go back and forth and mute and all that stuff, so that'll be cool. But anyways, the song is in D major, and so obviously we want to stick around scales of D, at least in my mind. I mean, that would make the most sense, of course, obviously using D major. There's a couple different ideas that I had initially about maybe writing in like Mixolydian or Lydian, and it just didn't really, I didn't really want to think that hard, honestly. Technically, I think Mixolydian would have worked the best if I wanted to do it, because all you're doing is you're flattening the 7th degree. So instead of this, what you're doing is you're just moving this note and flattening it, the 7th. And I feel like I could have gotten away with that, but I don't know. I was just like, it would be cool to maybe write in Mixolydian, but I didn't end up doing it. So, and the issue with Lydian is, so both of these are like major kind of focused, or like not, I don't want to say like uppity, but they're not like, super minor sounding scales. They're pretty bright. But the issue with Lydian is that it sharpens the 4th, which is G, and G is used a lot in the chord progression for during the solo. So like you have actually G itself, you have a bunch of different stuff going on, and G is also played throughout the entire song a lot. So it would just be, in my mind, it would just be kind of hard, and it would just like stick out like a sore thumb if all of a sudden I just had some like random G sharps thrown in there. So that's why I didn't do that. So what I did is I stuck with this D major scale, and the one, oh, I just dropped my pick. So let me grab this one. So the one that this is written in is or at least for the violin portion that I replaced, is I looked at where the violin started, and it's down here. So that's the D note that is first played. And what the violin is kind of playing is it's something like this. So what it's really doing is it's doing this lower half of the major scale here. And the full major scale would start here. So this is your root, and then you just play the major scale. So and that's it. So that's the scale that I worked with because that is the one that the violin used. So that's kind of like my home base and home operations that I started everything. So the first part of the solo is literally just essentially copying the violin that plays during its solo. And the reason why I did that is because it's recognizable, like it's from the song. And then after I do that, I'm just like, all right, now that it's recognized, here's how I can like modify it. So obviously this is the first part. After that, I was just kind of messing around with the scales itself, and ended up coming up like messing around with something like this. And that's the very first thing that I started doing. And I kind of was messing around with like playing it in different ways. So like, but I didn't like that because, and the reason why is it sounds too minor, or like too dissonant. And the reason why that is because what I'm doing is I'm playing this minor second. So I was just like, all right, what if I shift everything down and I play the root, and then from there I play the sixth and the fifth, which instead of this becomes this. Obviously, using the sixth and the fifth sounds much brighter, so that's why I ended up going with that instead, because I feel like it just fit the song more. Like the song isn't a dissonant song, so it didn't feel right playing so much dissonance there. So that's how I ended up with that. After that, I literally just shifted it up, and I was just like, all right, that sounds cool. And then at this point, I was just like, okay, I've got one more bar left. How can I change things up? And I was sitting there thinking, and I said, all right, a tapping part could be cool. So that's when I started messing around with tapping, and this was at the point of the song with around the B minor area and the A area, but primarily it was the B minor part that kind of got me thinking. I'm like, hey, I'm on the B string, so that means that this 24th note is B. That's when I was just like, all right, what happens if I just tap after that last part and go like this? And then what if I just try like moving the notes around here? And that's kind of where that came from. And then honestly, I just moved down because I thought it sounded cool. I didn't really have any true like musical like theory behind it. I just tried it and it sounded cool, so I did it. I do that a lot with a lot of stuff that I write. I mean, I know theory and I kind of know like the interval is just like how I recognize like, hey, I don't like the way that this sounds. Why don't I like how that sounds? Well, it's because it's a minor second. And it just didn't fit with the song, or it didn't jive. So that's how I kind of work when I'm writing music. Is I'll like play stuff, I'll be like, oh, that doesn't sound super great, let me see if I can shift it around a little bit, and does it sound cool like that? So that's the first half. The second half, now we're in the last four bars, I shift down, or I follow the violin exactly again, because I feel like that's a good way to start. The first four bars I started that way, the last four bars I can also do that. It's just a little lower. And at this point, I wanted to do some sort of legato thing or scale thing, and just because I thought it could be cool. So I spent honestly, quite a bit of time just messing around with different scale formations or like playing different, like the major scale in different ways just to see what I liked. And that's kind of how I ended up with this. I did that literally just to push into the actual scale run here, so I'm just like descending down to where the scale starts. And then starting here. And that's essentially what I came up with. I mean, originally I was thinking about going faster with it, and it just, honestly, super fast in this song doesn't really make much sense. It just doesn't fit with the overall theme, like just coming out and like going over the top and shredding. Like I kind of wanted something that like would actually, like, not to say that Taylor Swift would ever use this, but like it could potentially be something that would actually fit on the song. So that's kind of my idea. And the reason why I kind of want to do that scale run, and this is actually kind of funny, is I've recently been doing a lot of like burnt scale practices, and I was just like, all right, you know what? Let me just try adding something like that into the solo. It could be kind of cool, like actually applying something that I'm learning from like his videos and like some of the practice things that I've been doing, and just kind of seeing how it would work. And that's kind of where that came with. And that's like his hand synchronization and his economy picking videos. That's where the whole idea came from. And other than that, I mean, that's pretty much everything. Um, so yeah, I'm not like some crazy professional guitarist or anything. I'm just kind of thinking out loud when I was putting everything together, and that's how it all came to be. So other than that, that's about everything I have for the solo. Alright, everyone, so there's my analysis of Taylor Swift's Love Story, as well as a small kind of walkthrough or talking about, I guess, of the solo that I wrote. I hope you guys enjoyed it and maybe potentially learned something. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next one.